All right, model builders and non-model builders. It's important that you understand, as part of learning about a multicellular organism, such as your animal that you've been researching, that within you and any other animal or multicellular organism, there is a multitude of different kinds of cells that have all differentiated to become specific kinds of cells to do specific kinds of jobs. They have a unique structure and therefore a unique function. So I'm just going through to illustrate the idea with some examples of cells of the day I've used in the past to elaborate on this. So the first cell I'm going to talk about is hair cells. Now, don't be fooled. Hair cells don't have anything to do with actual hair, but they are found inside this structure, your ear, and their job is to help you hear or interpret sound, take in sound wave information that your brain will interpret into what you're hearing. So this particular image is showing you the surface of a hair cell and special structures called stereocilia that come off of those. And so when sound waves come through your inner ear, they shake or rattle or make these little stereocilia move. And when they do that, it triggers a reaction inside the cell that then signals a nerve cell on the other end to take that information into the brain. So what's unique about hair cells is you're born with what you're going to have. And so if you don't take care of your hair cells, so repeated loud noise use over long periods of time means you could damage your hair cells and lose your hearing. So when your parents say, don't play your music so loud, they're doing that because they know that is a culprit over time that can lead to hearing loss. You can't regrow hair cells. So hair cells are based inside your ear, the inner ear, and they're for hearing and balance. It's another diagram showing you these tubular-shaped cells with little stereocilia on the surface as part of the inner ear. And then they're attached to neurons, nerve cells. These are the stereocilia moving ions in to signal a message to the brain. So again, unique structures. All right, this is a cell that we have shown you. This is a skeletal muscle cell found as part of a skeletal muscle. So they're called muscle fibers. It's the same name as muscle cell or myocyte. They, again, are part of the organ, which would be a skeletal muscle. And they function based on these special proteins called actin and myosin. Spending a little ATP causes these things to move like paddles or oars in the water, and then they attach to here and pull, and that causes this protein to slide across the other. In order to get the release of ATP to do this, calcium ions need to flood into the inner part of the cell to cause this reaction. So calcium is important in bones, but also important in muscle function. This cell of the day, you might recognize, is a mature red blood cell, also known as erythrocyte. And what's interesting about erythrocytes, or red blood cells, is when they mature, lose their nucleus. They kick out the nucleus, and they have been filling up with an important protein that joins us in groups of 4 to make up something you know as hemoglobin. And hemoglobin carries oxygen. So this would be inside your bone marrow. The formation of a red blood cell would start here with this big cell, and then it would have a giant nucleus, and then as it matures, it loses its nucleus and forms its red blood cell shape, and they don't live very long without a nucleus. They only live about a month, and so your body is always replacing red blood cells. Your spleen helps recycle red blood cells that are used up. It's crazy to think about how much is actually going on in these cells and how much they carry. So each red blood cell, 300 million hemoglobin molecules with the ability to carry 1.2 billion oxygen molecules. And your body is forming these cells at 2 million per second. Adipocytes are also known as fat cells. Adipocytes have a giant vacuole which they store fat or triglycerides. And the nucleus gets squished off to the side. It's another diagram of adipocytes. You can see the big fat vacuoles, and then this thready stuff is what's called loose connective tissue, because that's what adipose tissue is. It's a loose connective tissue, usually under the layers of the skin. The epidermis and dermis underneath is a connective tissue layer. There's 2 different kinds of adipocytes, brown adipose and white adipose tissue. And what's kind of interesting about the brown adipose tissue is they have a bunch of extra mitochondria, because this is a type of cell that helps generate heat. It's actually really important in newborns. Newborn babies don't have the musculature to warm themselves up, so they have brown adipocytes in more abundance than we do to warm them up metabolically. And old people lose their brown adipocytes, so they have a hard time warming themselves up metabolically. All right, what is this kind of cell? It's called a pneumocyte. It's part of an alveoli of the lung. They're really thin, flat cells, and those cells are surrounded by capillaries. You can see the threaded red blood capillaries surrounding them. So pneumocytes, or lung cells of the alveoli, is what we're looking at here. And we can talk about 2 types of pneumocytes. Most of them are flattened type 1 pneumocytes, and they cover the surface area of most of the alveoli. And then they are going to have some type 2 pneumocytes, which are really important because they secrete the substance called a surfactant that coats the inside of the alveoli and allows gas exchange to occur. So really, really important. But they have little vesicles that they secrete the surfactant, the chemical that covers the inside or lines the inside of the alveoli and allows for easy gas exchange across these cells to get into the bloodstream. Here's a micrograph looking at pneumocytes and a capillary on the other side with red blood cells snaking their way through. This would be a type 2 pneumocyte and type 1 flattened. This is an interesting kind of cell found in lining your your digestive system and parts of your respiratory system. So lining this system would be these cells called goblet cells. So what do goblet cells do for you? Well, they're part of the epithelial tissue that lines your digestive and respiratory tract and reproductive tract. And these systems rely on a coating of mucus to protect. And goblet cells produce mucus. So these cells kind of do look like a goblet, fancy old world cup, and they have a pretty involved Golgi apparatus system that puts together vesicles that basically keep getting filled with mucus, and then they send the mucus vesicles to the edge and release them to the outside. And then that lines the surface of those different systems, the digestive, respiratory, and reproductive tracts. Another picture of goblet cells. So we'll stop there. We are not going to get through all of my slides here, but the idea again is there's a diversity of cell types, and you are picking an animal cell type that's specific within your animal, not just a generic one. So, and those that are non-model builders, you should know some of these examples for the quiz that you're going to be taking.